Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining today. My name is Rachel. I'm the Director of Housing Alliance here, and I know that many of you are here because you want to be. Many of you are here because you were told to be and have to be. And many of us are here for both reasons. So, for whatever reason you're here, thanks for being here. Welcome. I'm going to keep it very brief because Suzanne and Andrea from Housing Innovations are going to be leading our training today as well as next week. So this is a two-part training, and we're really excited to have Suzanne and Andrea from Housing Innovations here to lead us on these trainings. They have been doing this work for many years and decades as social workers and trainers, working with vulnerable populations and people experiencing homelessness in New York City, but also working with communities throughout the country who are doing the work that you all are doing. So you have a lot of experience, and they're the pros. So I just wanted to welcome you all, and I'm going to hand it over to Suzanne and Andrea to get us started. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Rachel. Good morning, everyone. I'm Suzanne Wagner. Andrea, do you want to say hi and wave so you
Hi.
pop to the top of the screen?
Yep.
We're so pleased to be here. We've enjoyed working in Delaware on and off over the years, probably almost 15 years. And I recognize definitely your agencies and many faces, many names as you signed up for the training. So, and as Rachel said, thank you. That was a nice introduction. We have been around for years, doing housing focused case management work and training. We are practitioners and just really know that your time is really valuable, that your work is really hard, that you have a lot to do, and that coming to this training meant you're not doing something else that you have to do. So, one of our main goals for this session is to be real, to make this a good use of your time, to be interactive, to provide ideas that you could use right away or tools and resources, and to be relevant, and not waste your time. So that's really our goals. We're going to talk about what housing focused case management is, but most importantly is that you're engaged. And we hope that in some ways, by making it on Zoom, it's a little easier to engage because you didn't have to drive and spend all that extra time, and that you can put your cameras on and be present with us as much as possible. I also know some days you're just not camera ready, so don't worry about it. It's fine to leave your cameras off. Um, so we'd love for you to also just put your name as on that shows up next to your in the bottom corner of your little box that shows your picture or your name. Just make sure it's the name that you'd like us your to be addressed, and also your official name. Like it's sometimes we get iPhone 27, and for attendance purposes, Zoom we gives us a list of everyone who's come. So if you could just correct your name if it's kind of showing up not as your name. And if you need help, just send us a chat and we can help you with that. We are very interactive. We have three breakouts, a couple of polls, and we know there's nothing like better than sitting with someone droning on Zoom for 2 hours, right? You live for that, right? Let me get a laugh or two. We're gonna try and not have us drone on, but have you also. It's a very big crowd. We've got, wow, 69 people here. Have you have a chance to meet some other people through some of the breakouts. But we really like interaction. So put things in the chat if something comes up, not outside the breakout, raise your hand,
Don't show no
unmute,
faces.
um, unmute yourself and talk. And so we can't go around and introduce ourselves because then we use the whole time to introduce 69 people. So if you would just so everybody knows who's here, put in the chat box your name, what agency you're with, your location, because we this is a statewide training, so there are people from all over the state. And your favorite thing about the spring, you'll notice my background today is cherries. They're just finishing blooming. I love the spring. I love the flowers. But just to clear the deck a little bit, you've had a busy morning already. You had whatever happened on the way to the office. You're having whatever's happening with the Zoom now. So just take a minute and think about what you like about the spring and pop it in the chat. And you can hopefully all read the chat. Um, oh, good. You guys are right on it. All right. Yeah, the colors. Okay, great. Sorry if anybody's having technical difficulties. We're sorry. Let us know if there's anything we can um maybe help with. Sometimes people's mics don't work on their computers, and if that's the case, then you can use the call-in number that's in the invite when you want to join the breakouts, and we'll talk about that. Okay. So the sun, yeah, the sun is great. The weather, today's nice. How is it there? Hopefully it's nice. Okay, great. We have people from everywhere. Thank you for indulging it. Hopefully you'll have a minute to take a look and see who's here. Maybe connect with people you want to connect with, or you'll meet some new people that we connect you with. Okay, great. All right. So I think that's our welcome, just our agenda for today. We're going to talk about best practices in housing focused case management, because that's what you're doing. As we understand it, everyone here is doing PSH or rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, or rapid rehousing. And it's obviously in a housing first context. So we're going to talk about housing focused case management in a housing first environment, because that's the kind of programs you have. And it is something that's there's a lot of discussion about housing first and some controversy. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but we'll also talk about how it can really be used for housing stabilization. It's not housing only. We'll talk about the case management process, the things you want to do to engage a relationship, because ultimately housing focused case management is a relationship based uh, activity, right? If you don't have a relationship with the person, you can fill out the assessment form, you can do the intake, you can do the plan, but you need to have a relationship where you're working together. And we're going to talk a lot about that. And then we're going to move into today assessment and goal setting. And really, what do we want to know about folks? How does that help us stabilize them in housing and do housing focused case management? And then how do we connect to people's goals and dreams and life after housing? Getting housed, right? So when you're working with homeless folks, maybe you're working with chronically homeless folks, maybe you're working with people who are newly homeless. Getting a house or a place to live is obviously the goal. But then what, right? Then what's next for people? What's next in their lives? What's their next dream? What's their next hope? What's next? And really connecting people to a future. So I know it is too big of a crowd to ask this to be go into the chat, but we're going to do a quick poll just to get a sense of the level of experience in the room. Is how long you've been working um, in housing programs for people who have experienced homelessness. Sorry, not experienced housing. Typo. Really fire that typist. It was me. Okay. All right. You guys are really good with the Zoom. Everybody's very, one of those post-pandemic things. Everyone's very, very skilled in using Zoom and the polls. Hopefully your technology is working. Okay, we have more. Oh, we've got quite a few people. We'll just give it another couple seconds. In case we didn't say it, and Rachel did such a good job of introducing us, but Andrew and I have been around for decades, not just
No.
years.
Mm.
And that includes before Housing First even existed. So now you know how long in the tooth we are. So that more than 10 years applies to us. But we didn't want to out anybody on the age front in this call. Okay, I think we have enough people. I'm going to share the results. 60 people responded. And you can see, wow, we really have a spread. We've got, about 20% of folks are more than 10 years in the field. Wow. And almost 20% are less than a year in the field, right? So we've got both ends of the spectrum and pretty much almost an even spread in between. Kind of, I guess the biggest group is in the 1 to 3 year. Um, before you know it, it'll be like us, it'll be decades. And having so much fun. Okay. So we want to just give a little background because this is a context of you're doing housing first, and we know that that is challenging for people, that people have good experiences, bad experiences with it. It's really works for a lot of people in housing them, very vulnerable people. Um, but it is hard. And so, where did it come from? It came out of beliefs that people who don't have houses have a right to housing. And if you don't have a house, you're ready for housing. Now, readiness is obviously, something that you can define a lot of different ways. But in general, kind of feeling like if people are homeless, let's get them into housing as quickly as possible. It also came out of the practice, though, from a street outreach, a mobile van that worked with seriously mentally ill people in New York City, and found that they never got housing because they never could take their medication as prescribed or get 6 months of sobriety or meet all the requirements it took to get into housing, and they never got housed. And that was Pathways to Housing, and they started directly housing people from the streets and then providing wraparound services, which is the key part. It's not just direct access to housing, it's the support, the housing focused case management that really made a difference. And they were very successful, and there was lots of research, and it was very successful with very vulnerable people. So that was way back in 1990, before some of you were even born. And it's really a model that's evolved over time and doesn't look the same everywhere. And there was that very first model, very intensive level of support services. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen is really varies is how much service you have, what your case management ratio is, that it may not be this very ideal 1 to 10 or 1 to 15, which was the original model. And so therefore you can't do it according to fidelity, but you still can be successful. But it's a little messy, it's a little complicated. And that's what we're going to try and kind of get our arms around as we talk with you this week and next, is about how we can make this work for people. Because really, essentially, what Housing First is low barrier on entry and on people meeting expectations to get in, but it's high expectations on behavior, expectations that people can follow the community norms, that they can follow a lease because they have your support, right? And that's really the trick here. It's not low barrier, low expectations. And I think that's some of the challenge we've seen with making Housing First work is people think anything goes, and really there are no rules. But the lease and our norms and our laws in their communities, obviously, we all have to live by that. And the ultimate goal is for people to be stabilized in their housing and follow the rules we all live by, right? So just to make sure we all have the same definition, we're not going to belabor the Housing First because we really want to talk about the case management practice, because we know you're practitioners and you've got people you got to work with. But basically, quick housing access, that's a goal. I know in rapid rehousing, that can be a real challenge because you have to find the units, sometimes also in PSH. But the idea is quick or immediate access while we're starting to provide support services. Once people move in, they don't have to accept services. They're voluntary for them, but they're not voluntary for staff. Staff use assertive engagement approaches, and people are not kicked out of housing just because they don't comply with the services and or attend case management sessions, but they do have to comply with the lease, right? They do have to follow the rules as everyone else, right? So it's helping people get in. And then the support is really to help people understand tenancy rights and responsibilities, develop tenancy skills, and connect with resources that are going to help them maintain that housing and prevent eviction. We don't want people to come back to the homeless system. We don't want people to get more evictions on their record. And so we like to say its services are voluntary for the tenants, but not for the staff. And that we're always using assertive engagement, right? That we are really, this is a relationship-based business. We could give you a recipe for how to do case management, but if you don't have a relationship with people, it's not going to really work, right? So we really want to engage people, assertively engage with them. That's not aggressively engage, but assertively. We need to make things attractive to people, want them to meet with us, right? Why do they want to meet with us? What do we have to offer? So this is, though, the important thing, that there are standards, and we did talk about that. I think this, hopefully these pictures are clear because you're all on your screens. Hopefully you have good sized screens. But Housing First is not housing only. It's not anything goes. If you look at this picture, sometimes we ask people what's wrong with this picture. You can certainly put it in the chat if you think something's wrong with this picture. We can talk about, oh, there's so many messages in the chat. By the way, also the slides are linked in the chat. Sophia did that at the beginning, if you want. Okay. Hoarding. Yep. So it's hoarding, and it's hoarding. Thank you, Katrina. It's hoarding to the point where you can't get in or get out, right? So that becomes a health and safety hazard, right? It's also kind of looks like A fire hazard, perhaps. There is a doggy in there, so who knows what's going on in terms of what the dog might have contributed to the pile. So we might have a health and safety issue there. Um, it's not sanitary, right? You guys are getting it, right? So
Mm.
fire hazard, great. Hoarding, mental health, trauma. Yeah, and hoarding and collecting, if you're middle class, we call it collecting. If you're poor, we usually call it hoarding, but um is an obsessive compulsive disorder. It's a chronic condition. People are going to need help managing their stuff forever. Some of you who have relatives who are collectors already are familiar with this. It's really helping people manage their stuff. So when we're thinking about housing, housing is the beginning. It's the beginning of a new journey for people, but it's not the end. And we really need the landlord, and this really becomes this is a lease violation, right? Because it's a health and safety hazard. So that is a lease violation. We need the landlord to give this person a notice saying this is a health and safety risk. You can't get in and out, explaining what's wrong, so that we as support workers can work with the person to resolve the problem. Because the motivator is that they want to hopefully keep their housing and stay in that housing and follow the lease and not move on. And we need to come at it with empathy, with compassion. These things are all very important to this gentleman. I know. I didn't even ask him, but every single thing in there is very important to him, right? So we got to come at this with compassion, with respect for people to help them figure out how they're going to be successful in their housing and move on in their lives, right? That's what the goal is. Just Andrea, if you could keep your eye on the chat because it
Yep.
is quite active. Okay, we've got some more things going on. Yes, where is he going to sleep? Yes. Is he lonely? Right. I mean, at least he has a dog. I didn't see the dog until like the 10th time I looked at this picture because it kind of blended in with him. I was so focused on the piles, but um, okay.
So people are just tuning in to what's happening in the room. So they were saying, nowhere for him to sleep. He's sitting on a mattress,
Yeah.
loneliness, safety hazard. So it's great.
Yeah. So hopefully now we know some people could make a room look like this in one day. Like they could move in today and it could look like this tomorrow. We have a lot of funny stories, like somebody moved in Hawaii to their house and then they had 12 chickens the next day because they were storing them out in the forest, which is apparently what you can do in Hawaii. But we're in Delaware and New York, so hopefully we're not getting 12 chickens in there. But people could make this mess in a day, right? So, but probably took a little time to build up. And part of it is, even though we want to really respect people's autonomy and their space, we do need to get into their apartments on a regular basis and check out that everything's going okay. It can be where we meet and then we leave and go have a coffee or go, it's a nice day like today, sit in the park on a bench and have a chat. But we do, hopefully, we would be able to see right away. We can usually see when people are in shelter that they're collectors or hoarders. You can see because they carry a lot of stuff around with them, a lot of examples of people, you know, but we want to prevent this from happening. So this is where building a relationship to have with him, to have that
Yes.
transparent conversation to
Yeah.
assist with the concerns. Yes, absolutely. We want to say, we're worried about you here, right? You could go on fire, you couldn't get out if there was a fire, right? And we also want to validate that this stuff is really important to him, even though, we may not exactly see the resale value. Okay. So just I think we've made most of these connections already. We do want people to have some degree of choice in housing, and that's part of the housing first model. But the reality is, and we don't live under a rock. We know that people have limited choices because they don't have landlord references, because they don't have credit histories, because they've been homeless for a long time, because they have felony backgrounds. And they're gonna have to probably compromise on where they move in. But that's something that, we can use to our advantage to really build success in housing, is this is the next place they're living, not the last place they're living. And if people are successful where they're living now, they're going to have some options for maybe where they go in another year. If you have successful tenancy for a year, you may have a landlord reference. You may have more options once you've saved some money, etc. But we don't want to, pretend that this is perfect housing because it's probably not people's ultimate choice. But we've seen the goal of, and think about this woman that we know wanted, she was in California. She wanted to live in Malibu. And I don't know if you know Malibu, but that's like where the celebrities live. So it's really, really expensive. So probably on SSI, not too affordable. But she moved into housing and then she put her name on the wait list. And Malibu has a housing authority, believe it or not. And about 2 years later, her name did come up, right? So she ultimately did achieve her dream. Now, hopefully she was good with all the crazy weather they've had, but we want to acknowledge that people, and we want to talk about and understand what housing means to people, how this fits in with what their dreams are for themselves and their lives and their family. The housing is in the community for the most part. I know most of you are working with scatter site. There are some single sites. We have to connect people to resources and supports. The case manager can't be everything to a person, right? There's no way one person can meet everybody's needs, nor should you. And that's exhausting and that's a lot of pressure. So, what supports can we connect people to? What services can we connect people to? So, we're really trying to help people connect in rapid rehousing, which most of you are trying to be time limited about, right? It's 9, 12 months. Maybe you could just pop in the chat how long is your rapid rehousing program that you are running? Because I think it varies around the state, but if it's all the same, so one person could put it in. But are you dealing with mostly 12 months, 9 months? But the bottom line is, whatever you're dealing with, it's time limited, right? So we really do need to focus on connecting people to supports because the rapid rehousing is going to end. But also, even in PSH, we know the more support people have, the better they do. That's just a fact. That's all the science. And we want to make sure we're teaching tenancy skills, lease compliance, connect people to income. I think one of the biggest challenges in housing first and making it work is people have no money and they have nothing to do all day. And so what happens? You have no money and nothing to do all day. You're going to probably get in a little trouble. You're going to probably figure out how to make money. Maybe you're going to rent out your couch. Maybe you're going to let someone use your apartment for something. Maybe you're going to go out and panhandle. Maybe you're going to be bored. Maybe your mental health is going to deteriorate. But really helping people get a routine, a structure, and income in their lives and resources. If people have no money, it usually leads to no good, I have to say. And they're bored. People are bored. They're lonely. Their mental health deteriorates. They use more substances if they use substances, right? So we want to make sure people have connections. They have something to do. We'll talk a lot about structure and role and purpose in people's lives. And that the lease agreement really drives our services, helping people comply with the lease, whether that's paying their rent, whether that's following the rules about noise, keeping it healthy and safe, etc. That's what we are focused on, helping people comply. We are not the landlord though, and we need an assertive landlord. And I also know that's a challenge. Sometimes you're dealing with the landlords you have out there. So some of them are more assertive than others. We're going to spend time in session 2 going deeper on that. But we really do need an assertive landlord to hold out the expectations of the lease. You didn't pay your rent, Andrea. You had your fourth party in a week, in 4 days, and disturbed the neighbors. Getting that in writing to her so that we, as the support workers, can work and support the person in maintaining housing stability. All right. So if we were in a room, given that definition of housing first, right? And we're just going to have another poll. I just want to say all the polls are anonymous, so we want you to be honest. And maybe you don't even care anyway, so if it wasn't anonymous, but they all are. Just some questions about housing first to just get a little beat on, are you using housing first in your program? Are you struggling with it? Do you love it? Do you wish it would go away? Again, it's anonymous, kind of a chance to laugh. Okay, I'm going to read comments. Okay, some of our, yes.
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk about that. We'll let people answer the questions. So there's 4 questions. You can all read them. Are you using it? Are you struggling with it? Do you love it? Do you wish it would go away? And be honest with us. We know it's hard. We also know it's really hard for people who are really vulnerable to get into housing without housing first. So, it's kind of picking the lane of what's hard, but we also know it can work for people and can work really well for people if we have the right supports and if we have the right services. Okay, I'm going to give Couple more seconds for people to answer because it's 4 questions. Okay, so Rachel put this comment in the chat, and I think it's important while we give you another second to answer the polls if you haven't answered them. Some PSH providers are both landlord and service provider, and making sure the roles are separate is important, and that can be hard to achieve. And that is absolutely very true. When we talk about landlord and support roles tomorrow, we'll talk a little bit about that. But it is important to separate them because in real life, our landlord is not our therapist. It's not our case manager, right? That's not a normal role for a landlord or a property manager. So we really want to separate those roles. So we also give people an opportunity to learn how to follow a lease like any other renter, and they could maybe move on. And or we're going to be gone because it's rapid rehousing and we're only going to be around for 9 or 12 months. I did not see the answers to those questions. So.
No, that wasn't there.
Okay. All right, so we're sharing the results. All right, about 71% are using it, about 16 are not, 10 are not sure. Other, we'll look in the chat, Andrew, if you can look in the chat. Are you
I'm looking.
struggling? Sometimes, occasionally, yep, no. Other, do you love it? Yes, okay. Some people do. Sometimes, yeah, that's so that we get about 76% between yes and sometimes. Because we see people who really been down and out and really struggled to be successful, do well, right? And we see that. Sometimes we also see people flame out, and we've heard lots of stories. Do you wish it would go away? No, sometimes. Okay, thanks for being honest, right? I think it's important that we not, say, oh, this is easy. Anybody can figure it out, or minimize how hard the work is for what you guys all do. So did we find out how long rapid rehousing is?
Yep, Katrina just answered in the chat and said rapid rehousing is usually 6 to 12 months. However, should be working on establishing, really good point, establishing connections with long-term resources. And that's a big key to rapid rehousing. So thanks, Katrina.
Yep, absolutely. So it's time limited, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about the engagement, but making sure people know that up front. And we have seen some success, and I'm just going to share this quickly because I know people and we're not separating these two trainings, but we're trying to talk specific issues that come up on both sides. But in rapid rehousing, people are struggling that at the end of the time, people are not ready to assume the rent. And there's a disincentive to increase income if you charge people a percentage of their income for rent, like 30% of income. And for many places, they've really been interested in paying a percentage of the rent. So for the first month, we pay 100%. The second month, we pay 75. The third month, we pay 50% of the rent. So we don't disincentivize increasing income. And we also get people used to paying more. And we've seen this in a project that we're working with in another state, where it's really forced people to really think about how realistic it is for them to assume payments at the end of the rapid rehousing time. So rapid rehousing as a model is in transition. The standards are variable. And I know that you guys get a lot of great support from the Housing Alliance on this. But I think as you talk about programs and we finish this trainings, you bring up in your COC meetings, think about the structure of the program and how you can help people really understand that it's a time limited support and they're going to have to pick it up.
Hey. So key to any program that serves people who have been homeless is housing retention, right? And Suzanne talked about that. So let's talk about some of the key practices, and you're going to see the overlap with Housing First because they're the same. They're focused on the same sort of things. So the first thing is it's low barrier, Suzanne talked about, right? We're trying to serve the people who really need to be served in the housing and services, but it's high expectations. High expectations means that people maintain their lease and can meet the expectations or the structure of housing with the help of a case manager. And so we want to help people be successful in housing. We want to help them hold on to the full rights and responsibilities of tenancy. And we also want to help people achieve their goals because that's what really motivates them and that's what they're thinking about all the time. So we want to combine those two things, and particularly for rapid rehousing, we are teaching people how to maintain housing in the future without the intensivity of case management. We want to link people to income, and we also want to link them to community supports. And Katrina mentioned this. We want to develop resources where they can get that assistance going forward outside of rapid rehousing. In permanent supportive housing, we also want to focus people on supports so that they feel more independent, they have more choice in terms of what they do. They also don't become solely focused on permanent supportive housing, so that I know in single site buildings, it can become a small town, or that they don't become case management focused, but they become focused on what their needs are and how they're going to get their needs met. We're going to set behavioral expectations, and that's important. We're not going to focus on the cause of it, though we're going to offer people remedies for that or treatment for that. But we are always going to focus on the behavior that interferes with housing and the expectations in the community. And as people focus on those behaviors, it actually is going to get to some of the causes. The other thing is we identify what means something to them. So we talk about self-identified goals, but goals that claw at people's hearts, goals that mean something to them, right? Because we want to set up how do these behaviors interfere with their goals. But if the goal is housing stabilization, it's not exactly a goal that people get all worked up about. But getting my kids back, getting a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and getting a big screen TV, that means something to people, and we can connect it to housing to make to help people understand why these behaviors are a problem. But we're going to really focus on those self-identified goals.
On it. This is the one that I shared last week, but lady over to the school, so she can.
Say it again. I didn't hear you. Were you making a comment?
I think it's someone just unmuted by accident.
Okay. So we have to really prioritize engagement and choice, right? So engagement is the relationship you get into people. It's a way of being with people. It's listening to them. We're going to go through this. It's focusing on comfort, relief. What are their personal needs? What are their personal goals? It's finding out more about them and developing that relationship. Services and stability plans are based on personal goals. We always put those personal goals in the stability plan. And as I said, those personal goals, like something that means something to them, something that they're look forward to, something that they got housing because of, is something that's going to provide that motivation for a plan. Do people have problems motivating people to do things like follow the lease, pay their rent, go to a point? Yeah. So that putting in that personal goal really helps. We're going to connect there to people's hopes and dreams. If their personal goal is to buy a house, that's fine. It may be a very long-term goal, but we're going to put that down and we're going to connect that to everything we're doing to help them stabilize in housing. We are helping people have something to do during the day. Suzanne mentioned, people move into housing. What do they do? How's it different from homelessness? You have no money and you're all by yourself in the apartment. It's very difficult for people, and people deal with that crisis. So instead of that, we want to help people guide the way that they deal with that crisis of being alone. We want to help them figure out things to do during the day, figure out things to look forward to. And that part of this is, some people, the only thing they look forward to in a week is their case manager visiting. And I'm sure you're all really nice people, and I would love to have you visit me in my house, but you know what? That shouldn't be the only thing people look forward to. So what's something that means something to them? Because that brings structure and purpose into their lives. So Shanta says people need to know that they're We're there to help them throughout the process. Absolutely. So that goes to role, right? And also helping them manage their finances and bills, not just drop them and say, figure it out. Auto pay, yes. So we want remedies, we want resources, we want to connect people to things. We also want to teach people that we're there for the long term, but I want to bring in those resources right now. Is that, as Shanta said, we need to connect people with resources that will help them not only now, but going forward, and that we are there to support them to use those resources. So it sort of shifts the role. So we want people to understand our role. And then the other part of this is the services being voluntary. Yes, they are voluntary, but there are expectations that are set by the lease. And part of our job is to help people manage the lease. We're also going to do really persistent engagement and continue to, as Shanta said, teach people about our role and what we can be helpful with and respond to things, and also offer them things that, based on the engagement, means something, especially to their long-term goals. Making sense?
I
Okay.
think, you really said that about, that role of what is your role? Are you a monitor for me now that I'm in housing? Are you like the landlord's eyes and ears? That's why it's important to try and separate those roles as if possible. But explaining to people that we're here to help you figure it out. And I like that
Yes.
language. I like it. Keep it simple. You have new circumstances. Do you need to make more money? Well, you need new resources. You need a new food pantry. You're in a different part of town or a different neighborhood, or you need to learn a different bus line. So really giving the message to people that we're there to help them make it work, just so important. So thanks for sharing that in the chat. We like all this interaction. Yay.
If I can have a quick chat with you
Yeah,
guys,
please.
one of the reasons why I was saying that is because we put the clients in their homes, we get them all set up with their furniture and their beds, we help them with getting their jobs, but then there's they there's a reason why they were homeless in the first place. It's because they
Yes.
couldn't figure out how to maintain and sustain. So
Mhm.
I feel like there's a part, one of the things that I do with my clients is I actually sit down with them before they move in, and I say, you have to figure out how much money are you going to take. If they're a fixed income, then you need to put your bills on auto pay. So then now you know what you have left over. If you don't want to eat and you want to drink, fine, that's on you. But at the end of the day, all of your bills are paid, all of everything is taken care of, and you can do your recreational. Of course, that's not the best, you know, plan for them,
Right.
but people are going to do what they want to do, is what I'm trying to say. Number two, after they get their jobs, I had a domestic violence girl. She went out and had to get 2 part-time jobs to compensate for 1 full-time job. We got her house. She's doing well. She has her dog. Had to have the dog. And but again, we had to sit down and make a plan before she moves in. How are you going to save? How much are you going to save from job A? Are you going to pay all the rent with job A? Are you going to pay all the rent with job B? How do you see yourself doing those things? And are you going to set yourself on auto pay? Again, I do this with my dad because he's a drinker. He's going to forget to pay the bills. So setting, getting some type of plan for them prior to them moving in, I just find it very conducive and very helpful for them.
It's one of the main eviction prevention strategies is for people to do direct deposit or rep
Yeah.
payee or auto pay their bills, right? And then this way, like you just said, what's left is for yours to play with. And whatever way you play with it, that may be something we want to work with them on, maybe not. But really, it's one of the standard main eviction prevention things. And I think if people can trust us that what we're giving them that advice and helping them set that up, and then they can relax too, right? Like, so people are anxious about not making it as well. So it sounds, Shanta, like you're really supportive and you're like, hey, I'm going to tell you this is going to work for you, right? And you're really giving the message that you're there to help the person be successful, which I think
Right.
is really, rather than to help them, you're going to fail. No, we know this is going to work, right? And I really like that message of we can do this. And I think that's a really important part, is we're a cheerleader. I don't know if it's on the engagement slide, but we're building motivation. We're building motivation, right? You did a little cheerleading thing there. And by cheerleading for people, we help build their motivation. And it's down here. We build their confidence and their sense of competence because they don't feel that way, right? When we meet people, that's not how they come to us. And so thank you for sharing that very good, really good advice and approach. Because it's clear how supportive you are, but also people need a little direction, right? So it's, you kind of offering and, but also really emphasizing what's going to help the person.
Also, I might ask them what's their plan and then try to
Absolutely.
fix their plan. They might be like, oh, I'm going to go sleep on my sister's couch. Well, does she have like a pool house you can stay in? Is there another place? If it's just a room, are you interested in shared housing? So it kind of gives them an idea. They give you an idea of what they want, and then you can kind of shift and make a better plan because most of the time the plans is shot.
It's a really good thing to figure out. Shonda, you said something else really important, which is that you talk about the expectations of housing, the financial expectations of housing before people move in. So you're setting the expectation that they hit those marks. And then you're offering remedies and also figuring it out with them before they move in so that they've got a plan. I know that doesn't mean they always follow the plan, but I think they hear us differently before they move in, and that it's important to start that process really early, which is great. So the high expectations we're talking about are the same as every other tenant. And we talked about financial expectations. In rapid rehousing, people have to follow a standard lease as they do in PSH. But the expectations is that they will assume the lease at the end of our rapid rehousing. So however long that is. So we want to start working on that initially. We want to talk to people around that. We want to talk to people about this is how the rapid rehousing program is designed. We also want to talk to them, as Katrina mentioned, we also want to talk to them about the resources that they will need as they develop those to maintain housing. For PSH, we want to also follow the standard lease and we want to build skills of tenancy. So we want people to build the skills of tenancy. I have to say that the lease also brings structure and purpose to people's lives. In order to do this, the lease has to be reasonable and it has to be enforceable. And it has to be consistent with other leases in the community. And also the enforcement has to be consistent with everybody else that this landlord serves. But part of this is we can't expect people to follow the lease perfectly on day one, right? So the lease rules have to be taught, but that's a thing that happens between the landlords and the services. The landlord enforces the lease consistently and fairly, and the services teach people what their options are to follow the lease and provide support in them following the lease and teach those skills. But the case manager is not the enforcer. As Suzanne said, it can be confusing for people. So we focus on the full rights and assuming rights of responsibilities of tenancy. We are going to help coordinate with the landlords. Can be anything as to, you want to meet the landlord, you want to help them, teach them skills in working with the landlord, you want to contact the landlord. And the staff work to change behaviors, right, that interfere with the lease compliance. So use of alcohol, you may see that as your problem, right? As the problem with the person, and that may be true, but the real problem for the landlord and to maintain his tenancy is that he's keeping people up at night and moving people in and having these loud parties. That's what we're going to deal with. We're going to deal with the behavior and we're going to connect it to the lease violation. So we're going to help people meet those behavioral expectations. We're going to help people with recovery role as they define it. We're going to help people assume their own roles. It's not just our roles we're going to talk about. We're going to help people assume their roles in the community. Once again, that ties into structure and purpose. Okay. So we're going to break people up. And we're gonna assign people randomly. So we're helping you meet somebody you haven't met before. So it's important to introduce yourself. And these are just discussion prompts. These can guide the conversation. You can really talk about, but they don't have to be in any order. They don't have to be, but it's something about which services have been most important to you in keeping people housed. And you guys have already mentioned some of those in the chat. And what challenges and successes are you experiencing in supporting tenants to retain housing? Welcome back.
They still have 10 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, everybody's back.
Welcome back. So we are not going to go through a group by group debrief, but wondered if there was something you got out of this exercise, if you heard something that was different or heard something that really supported something you're doing. If people are having similar challenges. Did you hear anything?
I like to chat. So I was on the line with about 5 people. About 3 of us got a chance to say something. Somebody got cut off. But what we are definitely all experiencing the same things. Someone asked the question, where are the agencies that are helping those that are unsheltered, that are um, in that middle range where they're not a veteran, they're working, but they don't make enough to support themselves, or they're living in a hotel now they don't have enough to save. Where are those agencies for those individuals there? I thought that was a great comment that she made, and my suggestion was to just get familiarized with some of your other agencies in your community, collaborate with those other agencies, and also maybe we have to recreate another wheel. Like I said, maybe the normal wheel has 6 spokes. Maybe we need to be talking about 5 spokes. Maybe we need to try to, if we're constantly doing the same thing, the same way, we're going to get the same results. And I'm not saying that the agencies don't work. We're doing a great job. I commend everyone that's on here that does the same thing we all do, try to help individuals. But at some point, we do have to find the loophole, which what we're doing now, and try to recreate that for that specific group. I work with veterans, so we have a lot of resources for them.
Sure.
However, what about the lady like myself? What about me when I was unsheltered and had to stay with my mom for 6 months? Or what about the homeless domestic girl that I just had with her dog? I had to do something for her for like 7 days. That was, people might say, oh, don't do that, but it worked. And in order for it to work for her, in order for her to get to that next level, this is what had to be done. And
Shanta, it is
yeah.
part of this that you have resources for certain groups and you're looking for resources for other groups,
All groups.
and that you're getting all the groups. Okay.
Right.
So that you're looking for sort of coverage. Yeah, that's a big issue, right? I think that you're right, is we have to look to our community, and that is not everybody's going to get a continuum of care resource, but that's definitely a discussion that you want to have. I don't know if you meet together with other providers in your area and talk about unserved groups. That can be really helpful, but that's a big issue.
Yeah.
I don't know
Or
if
like
anybody
being
else.
with children, there's this thing about families, right? Most of the time we think about female with their children. What about men with their children? Or
Right.
you can't, there's an agency here, but they only take women with children. Now
Mhm.
that man has a child, but he can't go there because of, and vice versa. It's
So
just
what's the resource? Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and there's some comments. I think these are great because I think that
Yeah.
building the network of resources, and I know that
Yeah.
Delaware is very varied. Like some places have a lot more resources
Okay.
than others, and there are gaps. And I'm noticing somebody put in the chat, there's a gap. Um, uh, that programs aren't long enough in 30 days to get people services, and that we don't have services for people while they're waiting for an apartment. And the resource piece is such a critical part of making it work. And almost everyone in our group stated challenges was finding affordable housing
Yes.
and the income and wage limitations, right? So, and those are things, and I think, systemically, we want to look at them, and we want to look at them also as a community, and what are the gaps, not just for me as an individual worker, right? Because I could be trying to find a resource, childcare, but maybe we need to look at it as an agency and see, is there a real gap in our system? Can we do anything about that? Are there any resources that we can bring to bear? What are we using the resources we have to the fullest advantage? So it's really good because it's a lot of what we're going to be talking about in the next time is the resources that people need, because that is really the difference
Yeah.
between people who are homeless and people who aren't. People who are not homeless have more resources. They have more resources to spare, right? So, and I know in Delaware, depending on where you are, there are a lot of churches and there are a lot of faith-based groups that provide a lot of resources. So also, thinking about formal supports, but also informal supports, right? Thinking about how are you engaging that church that has maybe, clothing for work or, other resources that might be helpful.
Just really quickly, I just think that, and in this state particularly, that there are services, but like you guys were saying, it's getting people to those services, getting people to know what those services are.
Yep.
Really, I don't know if it was you that actually said it, Suzanne, but also having when people are waiting for housing, there should be something being done in that wait. I mean, if it's no more than you're teaching them how to actually take care of a house, how to take care of finance, almost like home ec that they don't have anymore in schools. So almost like something like that, so that when people do get to housing, then they know what to expect, they know what to do. But the thing that you were saying about the resources, because I feel like there are resources. They might not be all the right resources, but it's some kind of way we have to find a way to connect those that need the services to those services. So as an organization, whatever we do, we should also be thinking about what we don't do and who can we send them to that can help them with, because we could take you so far. So we should be able to, if you still need assistance, we should be able to send you to somebody else to help you with X, Y, and Z. Because we've already done A, B, C. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really key part of putting the program together, because it's not just a good case manager, but it's also having a good list of contacts and resources that people can use. And, this is not a training. I just want to pick up, Brenda, on something else you mentioned, is that this is not a training on the shelter piece, but
Right.
while people are homeless, the evidence and the best practices that people are getting connected to resources, that they're getting tenancy classes. And we know, I guess, because Andrea went into a couple of the breakouts, that some of you doing outreach, some of you working with people while they're homeless. And that is an important phase, if it's possible and people have the resources, to do some training on a lease, to do some helping connect up with resources, getting people money, getting people clothes, getting people furniture. So when they move into housing, they're comfortable. But that's not our focus today, but it's a really is a best practice. But I know a lot of the shelters are really stretched. They have very thin staff. And so, that's not bad idea to use volunteers, invite people into the shelters who can do a tenancy class, legal aid, actually, and you guys have some great legal aid people in Delaware. I've met them. Could they come in? Could a partner organization come into the shelter, or even the housing program come to the shelter and start orienting people while they're in the shelter to what they need to know for housing? But that's an important piece, I think, of making Housing First work better. I see some things popping in the chat. I
Yep.
just wanted to make
There's some couple of resources for financial. There
great,
is,
great.
Katrina put that in. And,
Yep. And like cooking on a budget and
Yeah.
shopping on a budget and all that great stuff. But I think we need to move on,
Yes.
because
Yep.
time is flying. And one thing I didn't say is we really honor your time, and we will end at 12 o'clock. And since we have another session, not to worry, if we don't get to all the slides, we can pick up with them next time. So
We're going to sum things up a little bit, and we're also going to talk a little bit about what we're going to get to. So engagement is really important. And that in order to do housing focused case management, we have to really engage with the person. And we're going to go into some details around that. We also have to assess their service needs, their goals, their homeless and housing history, which is critical because, as you mentioned, this is a transition for both PSH and rapid rehousing. So we want to look at what their behaviors were in the shelter or in past housing and see how we can facilitate this transition into housing this time. There are some assessment domains, which are domains that are seen to help people stabilize in housing. It's taken from the evidence-based practice of CTI. So that's at the bottom, and you have the link. You guys all have the PowerPoint. And there's also a phase plan, which we're going to refer to later, which helps you organize the work and plan for the work that you're doing to help people in the transition. You want to mutually set goals. We've got an exercise around that. And we talked about that a little bit. You also want to develop that plan, which I mentioned is at the bottom, and you want to revise and update. These have to be living documents. You want to use the assessment or update the assessment as you get new information, and also on a regular schedule when you redo the plan. So let's
some
get
of you may call it a service plan. Some of you may, I'm sure many of you use this kind of structure of assessment, intake, assessment, and service planning. And we're trying to really focus it on housing stabilization planning, right? So using some different language, and when we're meeting with people, so that they're thinking about the goals of what we're working on together. And the links are here. We'll pull up the phase plan, I think, next session.
Yep.
So
Yep.
people can see it, because we're going to go deeper on the plan, but we'll pull that up next time.
So we want to think about the supports that people need to maintain their housing. And one thing that we've talked a lot about is high quality services and treatment resources. And that we want the resources to be sustainable. We want them to be accessible, as you guys said, there's a problem sometimes getting people to the appointments. But we also want to train people and mentor people to make those connections with resources, which means that a big part of the recommendation is we go with people to some of these services and teach them how to make that connection. We always want to focus on income, certainly for PSH, but also especially for rapid rehousing. People are going to need income. And I noticed in the chat that one of the people said that one of the challenges is what people are able to make doesn't really match what the housing is. So we want to look at those resources. So we want to look at out of system resources. We also want to look at other strategies where people could maybe manage housing. And you mentioned some of them, like rooms for rent or, shared housing. And we can certainly talk about that when we talk about housing. We want to make sure that the case managers have time to really spend with people. This mentoring and teaching and going with people and making these connections with these resources, the engagement, doing a full assessment, that takes time. And we want to make sure that you have adequate staff and that you are able to spend the time that people need, especially when they first come into these programs. You can, you want to look at the evidence-based practices. I know we did a little bit in Delaware on critical time intervention, which is focused on that transition piece. I know we've done a lot for the VA on that. And we also want to look at motivational interviewing. We want to look at psych rehab, which is those coping skills to work through and meet the expectations. And we want to look at other recovery-centered modes because we're helping people get their place in the community. So these are just some of the supports. So Shanta says something. cap landlords with rental properties per rent reasonableness. Yeah, well, rent reasonableness applies to what you pay for properties. It doesn't necessarily apply for landlords. There are other systems that other places have been using, like a rent commission in different places, and we're happy to give you information on that. But yeah, that's another system thing that Suzanne mentioned, and that's really worth the conversation. Okay,
Andrea, can I just hop in and mention, since we're
sure,
talking
Rachel.
about never mind.
No,
This is
go
the
ahead.
slide. No, this
Okay.
slide will speak to what I was just about to share. Go ahead.
Okay.
No,
Sorry.
no, please, we
Please,
want
go ahead.
Okay, I'll just
participation.
say, I think we see it a lot, at least from the centralized intake side, when referrals are being made to permanent supportive housing, that that first month or two, as people are moving in, there can be a
Yeah.
lot of challenges
Yep.
with behaviors, addictions, and a lot of it having to do with the transition, isolation. And I think that's just like a really hard and challenging time for folks, both providers and the folks who are moving in. So I just wanted to speak to that a little bit, and you're about to do that.
We didn't
You
plan
could.
Rachel to say that, but
Nope.
that is exactly where we're going. So
Yep. Yeah, Rachel's right. I mean, the first couple of months are really hard. I mean, all of it is hard, but the first couple of months are particularly hard, and it's a big adjustment for people. And so we want to think what the transition is like for people. And that sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but I certainly did this. I thought people got housing. Yay, everything's done, right? And sometimes they believe that too. I'm done. I don't need any help. I'm in housing. But you know what? They do, right? Because there's a reason they're being referred to these programs. And that it is an opportunity for change. It is an opportunity for a new start. But there's a lot of loss when people leave shelters and outreach programs. There's also gain, but people have to see that. It's a new structure. Um, it's a new schedule, there are new expectations, and that's often scary. This can also increase people's symptoms. If people have mental health disorders, and it's very quiet in housing. People aren't used to quiet. So that, that can trigger things. Stress can trigger things. Learning all this new stuff. Who do they count on? You know what? Sometimes it's, who do I play cards with? I play cards with my buddies every afternoon. Who do I play cards with? And that card game really, help them make connections and do all that. How do I do this? That uncertainty can really increase anxiety. You know what? It can also scare people that now I've got housing, now I'm going to lose it. Right? And it requires a lot of support. It requires a lot of mentoring. It requires a lot of teaching. And, we talked about shelters, and Suzanne mentioned that, that this isn't specifically, but we can talk to shelters, we can talk to outreach programs. But even if they teach people about a new schedule and how to work a laundromat and everything else, it goes out of people's heads. So they need to be re-taught. The expectations, when you're anxious, do you remember all the things you're supposed to do? I don't, right? So that it's something that we have to reinforce. And this is time heavy. And yeah, people struggle a lot when they first come in. I mean, everybody has the example of a guy who came in and he was really proud of himself. And even on the streets and in shelters, he'd been able to maintain sobriety for 4 months. And he'd been going to AA and everything else. And the first night in housing, he has a big party to celebrate being in housing. Right? Is that throwing it out? Not necessarily, I mean, and then what do we do? Right? And that, I think that those connections, I think all of those things really need to focus on. And I think we need to focus on our expectations. And it's not going to be all smooth sailing when people move in. It's a big adjustment. Okay, so this is about housing. I see it, Katrina. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to come back to that, right? Okay. What?
I'm just reading the chat.
Oh, okay. Okay. So does this sound right to people? Is this a sort of thing that people go through in transitions? Are there other things? Rachel mentioned,
Well,
no?
and I guess I would just say, people are going through the transition, it's hard. And then if they're getting turned down by housing, it's even harder, right, on
Yes,
that person.
yes.
Right. And I think that the main thing is that people need a lot of support around the transition. As Andrea said, even though it's like, great, you're getting housing, there's so much that comes up for people. It isn't a pleasant process. You have to basically bare your soul to the landlords and
I'll say.
share everything, right? And it reminds you of that you might fail again, right? And people are in a really vulnerable state. So engaging that relationship as a support, like you guys have been talking about, is such a critical part of making it work and reassuring people that we'll figure something out. I mean, I feel sorry for that poor woman who keeps getting denied, but
Yes, me too.
also preparing people for that landlords are, this is what's going to happen. It is a landlord's market in a lot of places right now, so landlords have choices. As much as we can immunize people, we want to, but we can't for everything. We don't know everything that's going to come up. You ready to go to the next slide?
Yep, yep, absolutely. So we talked about building the relationship. We talked a little bit about engagement strategies. So this is really about the key elements of engagement strategies. One of the most important things is you want to be consistent, you want to be reliable, and you want to be supportive, right? We want to always listen for what's important to the person, what they're interested in. Find something you admire about the person or that sort of thing. It'll shine through your eyes. We want to explain what our role is, right? When we come in, what's the role of the case manager, right? Katrina talked about boundaries a little bit. We want to be clear that this is a professional relationship, but that we are there to help people and stay with them during the process, right? So that's what Shanta was saying. And I think that we need to focus on that. We're helping them figure things out, right? And that's our job. And that might include helping them to get resources they need, but we also want the resources to be sustainable. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how we're going to meet with somebody. We're going to find something to work on together to establish the mutuality and the success of working on it together. It can be very simple, right? They might have lost their ID. We're going to help them get an ID. That can be simple or really complicated, but we're going to work on something like that. And we're going to start working on tasks together to establish those roles. We're going to help people find some comfort or some relief, right? That's a really important thing. And we're always going to present housing as getting what they want. So that means that we are talking to people about what their felt goals are, and we are going to help people connect housing to it. And finally, we're going to keep showing up. We're also going to pay attention to where people come from, what their culture is, what their gender is, what their race is, how that affects what their histories are, how that affects how they're engaging with us. And we have to really take that into account. Okay. So most important thing is be yourself. People know if you're authentic or not. People know if you're listening to them, if they're important to you. We want to be ourselves, and we want to think about how we establish this relationship. We're also going to follow through with people promptly. People have a lot of expectations of case management, which might have been based on previous case management. Everybody leaves, nobody gets back to me. If I don't get what I need right now, I'll never get it, which leads to a lot of crisis orientation. So we want to really follow through. We want to be patient. And we want to not to push any agenda. We can talk about the structure, let's say, of a rapid rehousing, but we're going to also ask people if that can work with them or if there's something else that they need, but that's the structure of this program. We're also going to be trauma informed because let's face it, everybody we work with has been affected by trauma. So that means giving people choice. That means, letting people have a little bit more control. There's always going to be a little bit of an imbalance, but we're going to help people with that, right? It means that safety is a big priority, and it's helping people be planful around the things that they need. We're also going to provide concrete assistance, especially to meet basic needs. Somebody mentioned furniture. That's a great thing. That's a huge thing when people are settling into their housing. Um, but people have to have clothes to eat. They have to have clothing that keeps them warm or cool. They have to have, gear that they need. They need plates. They need all of that. And we want to help people get those things. We also want to help people get hygiene supplies, things that make them feel better about themselves. We want to help people get documents. We want to help them get the things that are tools to move forward in life. And we always want to present housing and a place in their community and housing stability, right? And in rapid rehousing, it may mean the same house in long term, it may be a different house, but we want to present being stable in the community in housing as a way to get their goals met. So oftentimes we would talk to our clients about housing is the shoes that people wear to walk forward in life, right? So we want to really always reinforce housing as the base. The other thing, and we mentioned trauma-informed care, we want to offer as many choices as possible. So think about this for a minute. As rapid rehousing providers or as PSH providers, have you ever said to a tenant in one of your programs, so how did you get here? Why are you here? And they say, my outreach worker or the shelter worker made me come, right? So if people, there's an old expression, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. If people never have a choice, it's going to be hard for them to take ownership of the place. So that's a housing example, but that goes to everything. We want people to have choices about how to address issues. And we said to them, we're going to work with you to figure this out. And we need to figure this out so it's more than one thing, that people have options to do to even follow basic rules. If you're, and we're going to talk about this definitely next week, but if you're getting in trouble for making a lot of noise in the building, what are your choices? One is stop making noise, but that's not the only choice. The other might be putting rugs in this, right? So we're going to talk to people about what their choices are. And as much as possible, and we're going to integrate that in every interaction. We're going to build confidence and we're going to build trust. And we talked about, coming back and getting back to people as quickly as possible and follow up. But we're going to build confidence in their own skills. So we're going to isolate skills. We're going to talk to people about skills so that they can apply them to the next thing. And confidence and a confidence in each other and a confidence in yourself and trusting each other helps people move swiftly through this. We're going to ask for help. If there's going to be complicated clinical pictures, beyond none, case managers have the most complicated clinical roles. So we're going to help people get consultation. If something doesn't look right to you, talk to your supervisor, talk to a clinician, get help. So that's been really critical in helping move people forward. And the other thing is seeking information, talking to that outreach worker, talking to that shelter, getting a warm handoff, and really reading all the things that you can about previous treatment. And you can get some of that where they've been to from HMIS, and you want to really follow up on that. And finally, it's keeping your promises and coming back and coming back and coming back, right? It's that persistence and it's keeping your promises. Okay.
So I periodically go to the chat to see
Okay.
what's in there, and I see lots of furniture resources, a whole house for less than
Wow.
$800. So make sure you're checking the chat box. And we love that about these sessions and bringing people together so that they can share resources. And we're going to do another breakout now, and we
Yep.
have some discussions, and I'll try to remember to project the slide. But you can also, use your time when you're in your breakouts to talk about what you want to talk about too, if somebody's got something they really want to discuss. But this breakout is really to talk about building relationships with
Yep.
people, and talking about a person. Introduce yourselves. You forgot to put that because you'll be in a new group, I think.
Yeah.
And talk about someone you had difficulty engaging and why and what you overcame, how you overcame that. And again, those are just prompts. You're adults. You're in a group with other people that you may or may not know at this point in time. So use that time wisely, and we'll give you 10 minutes in the rooms. Come back to the main room if you have trouble.
Welcome back. We're sorry to interrupt you. It looked like you were having good conversations. Is there anything people want to share out of this breakout group? Good story, somebody you engaged who was looking around, who was not engaging, or who looked at you like a creditor? Any engagement barriers you're seeing?
Seven, 3, 4.
I thought someone from our group had a good story, but I don't know
Yeah?
if she's willing to share.
Thanks, Rachel.
And I can't remember her name. I'm sorry. Was it Phyllis?
Yes, Phyllis, yes, I'll be willing to share, yeah.
Wonderful.
I was telling everyone in my group, I had a client referred to me, and it was very, very difficult to engage with her. She would not answer phone calls or text messages or just anything. And when she finally agreed to meet with me, she brought a worker that she had from another agency, another resource. She brought her along.
Interesting.
Yeah, she brought her along, and after everything was over, she said to me, I ignored you on purpose. I've been disappointed so many times. I didn't think this would work. She said, and I'm sorry I did, you're a nice lady, whatever. But she just explained, she gave agency names, she gave workers' names, examples of how she had been disappointed, let down, promises were not kept. And she said, I just didn't think it would work. She said, so yeah, I did ignore you. I got your messages and everything, but I'm glad I met you. And long story short, she was housed
Don't
in
look good, but you're
2
happy
weeks.
with it.
She loves her place.
Marriage don't
And
last.
now she's giving me resources. She'll come to me and say, oh, I found this pantry in the area. You can tell your clients about this pantry. And she's so happy in her home, and her kids are adjusting. And yeah, it turned out great. But
It's a great story.
yeah.
Was the other worker she brought with her helpful?
She was just a support,
Okay.
basically, yeah. And sometimes
Okay.
now I will reach out to that other worker, like, she changed her number recently, and I didn't have the new number. I've been trying to reach her, couldn't get her, and I called that worker. She gave me her card and everything that day, and I called that worker, and she said, oh yeah, she has a new number, gave it to me, and she said, oh, I'm sorry, I meant to give it to you, but I was glad I had that worker's card and I could reach out to her, and she was able to give me her new number. And yeah, but yeah, she was just a silent support for her. She really didn't add anything, but this
But she
client,
was like, and they call that a warm handoff. And
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
that is a best practice. Sometimes it's just going with someone you feel comfortable with, and that helps you relax, and then that person could engage with you. It's such a great story.
yeah,
It's a wonderful story.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is. It is. I'm so happy for her. She and her family, they're fine, they're adjusting. But yeah, it was hard. It was hard. But I kept up. I did not give up. I just, it was almost to the point where we were gonna send the referral back. But I just continued just almost hourly phone calls at the end. I was like, okay, and then I guess I wore her down and she answered.
Well, that's okay. That's good.
Yeah, we went from there. Yeah, that was good.
You've also established the trust with the workers so that your narrative can begin to change with the new workers. And the warm handoff is really important. That's a beautiful story. Carly says that something my organization has been doing is a morning empowerment circle to try to inspire guests to seize opportunities. And I think that using some of that peer support and that community and helping people feel a little bit less alone can be a very engaging strategy. So that's a great one. Thank you, Carly. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay.
I think that that's so great what people are putting in the chat about
Yeah.
support to people and
Yeah.
really giving the offer of assistance from a supportive place, right? Even though people maybe have lots of barriers, but that we're coming at it with a can-do attitude and I'm going to walk with you kind of attitude. So hopefully it was also good to meet some of your colleagues and chat with some new people. But now we're in our last 20 minutes, and as I said earlier, we don't go over time. So you're going to get a little bit of some New York, a little bit fast talking, but we're going to pick up this conversation. It's really a bridge builder between this week and next week about assessment. And, we're talking about, and Andrea did that slide that really overviews the process. We're engaging someone, we're assessing them, we're developing a service plan, and then we're revising the service plan. But we're doing all those things always all at the same time. So from the first time you meet someone, you're assessing them. You're learning something about them. Is this person timid? Are they shy? Are they gregarious? Do they make eye contact, right? We're always kind of taking in information about people whenever we're with them, whenever we see them, whenever we read their chart, we talk to another worker, maybe we get some background information. Excuse me. But part of that is also what is important for us to know. And this also comes out of the research about the things that we want to learn about because they're likely to affect a person's ability to be successful in their housing and in the community. And it comes out of the critical time intervention model. But we already mentioned housing and homeless history. And it's really important to know those two stories. And we kind of talk about them separately because they really are often put together, but they really are two different things. And I'm going to go in more depth on those in the next slide. But it's important to know that because then we know what do they know in terms of maintaining housing? Have they ever had a lease, et cetera, et cetera? And then what was their life like while they were homeless and what caused their homelessness? Because that's going to be a key indicator for us when we're working with the person to maintain stability of what's likely to come up in the future. So if it's the car broke down and they paid the car repair so they could get to work and then they couldn't pay their rent, well, we got to think about that car, right? Did they get a new car? Is that car still going to keep potentially breaking down so that we can help prevent that from happening again? Or was it they gave all their money to their kids because they felt guilty that they were in foster care for a while or something like that? Or did they spend all their money on other things, recreation, as people have called it, drugs and alcohol, or gambling? Gambling is very popular lately. We keep hearing about people spending money on gambling, and then that is what caused their homelessness. So we want to understand those things. It's important. We want to know what people do with money. Did they get money and they spend it all? We talked about it earlier. Having direct vendor or automatic bill payment can really help. So what do they do with their money? Do they have a work history? Have they worked before? What has been their experience in terms of income? If someone has really never earned more than a certain $20 an hour and they're planning for a housing they really need to earn $50 an hour, we probably need to make some connections to get from one place to the other because that's not an easy lift. We also want to know people need help managing their resources and some maybe financial counseling from a community action agency, etc. We also want to know what people's life skills are. And we don't mean like, can they make their bed? Because you're probably not going to get evicted if you don't make your bed. But if you can't take out the garbage because you're psychotic and you think that, inside the devil lives in the garbage can, that's going to create a problem, right? Because you're going to collect garbage in your unit, right? If you can't travel to get to appointments from where you are because you don't understand the bus system, that's going to be a barrier. So we want to maybe we need to do some training for folks. Do people know how to write a check? Do people know how to get a money order? Those kinds of things. Can they be safe in the community? Can they assert themselves? I think one thing that we see with a lot of folks when they transition is they have friends that they were friends with when they were homeless, and they say, "Oh, well, Andrea needs a place to sleep. She can sleep on my couch." And Andrea is very happy to ask me for that. And then I can't say no to her. Can I assert myself? So life skills also are, can you assert yourself? Can you protect yourself? Can you get help when you need it? Can you say no to your friends? Because if you move Andrea in on your couch, you're probably going to put your housing at risk. Because another housing risk that we haven't talked that much about, but comes up a lot, is moving people in who aren't on the lease. That's another common issue that we hear about. Moving in friends and family, moving in people you owe favors to. Someone mentioned they're working with the vets. A lot of times the veterans get housing and then they have the best housing of everybody in their family and everybody moves in. So that's a tenancy skill to know you can't really just add people into your home without adding them to the lease, right? We also want to know, what are those friends like, right? And do people have support? Do they have somebody they can call when they're happy, sad? Should they really be living maybe with their sister, because their sister has two little babies and they have two little babies, and if they live together, they might be able to make that $2,500 rent that we were just hearing about, and they also might get a break because they could maybe share childcare and not always be on as a parent. When you're a single parent, you're on 24 hours a day, right? So parents getting a break. And then, of course, we want to know about things I think that are often commonly learned about during the assessment is, do they have any mental health issues? Do they have substance use issues? Do they have health issues or medical issues? And then, but in the assessment, we're looking at what's the history in each domain, what's going on currently. Maybe they had depression in the past, but they're not depressed now. They've been in treatment. They're taking medication. We want to know what their strengths are in each area. We want to know their barriers, and we want to know what their motivation is. Do they have goals? Do they want to work on their depression? Do they want to make more friends? Do they want to get a new job or get a new career? Right. So in each of the domains, and when you look at the sample form, the assessment form that was linked 2 slides ago, you'll see in each one of these areas, there's a series of questions. And we're looking at, are barriers created as well in this area? Is there motivation to work on it? And then what are their goals? Do they have goals around making friends, around owning their own home, around living in Malibu, right? So when we're assessing, we're learning like about these issues in their lives, but also where are they at vis-a-vis this issue? Maybe I have had mental health issues, but now I'm taking my medication. I have a therapist. I'm in good shape. Or maybe now I'm not. Or maybe childcare is my barrier. I'm trying to work, but I have no childcare and my baby's only 2, right? So we're looking then to set goals that we can work on with people based on knowing them. One thing I want to say is that if we can learn things from previous providers, it really does help save people telling their story over and over again. And but sometimes I know in homeless fields, we don't have a lot of records. So we do have to ask these questions to people. But take a look at the form between now and next week. We don't have that much time today, so I'm not going to pull it up, but we will next time. So I already referenced this, the housing and homeless history. So you can read these slides yourselves. You can see what's in the housing history, which is where they lived, were they a leaseholder? Did they have roles? Did they pay the rent? Did they write the check? What worked, what didn't work for them, and then how happy are they in their current place? And remember, we want to know if they're happy where they are, and we want to know what they like about where they are in their new housing and what they don't like about their housing. Because if they're not happy, they're not going to invest, right? They may not care about following the lease. So if they're not happy, we want to again reinforce that message that this isn't the last place you're living, it's the next place you're living, right? It's the place for now to solve the housing crisis you're having, but let's work to some success so we have more options in the future. And then, as we've mentioned, we want to know what caused their homeless history, their homeless episode. This is not a fun story. So we're not asking this on the first meeting. We're not poking around homeless history. If we can find it in the HMIS record, it would be great, but maybe we can't. But we want to have a sense of how long has this person been homeless? How many times have they been homeless? What's their routine like when they're homeless? Is this someone who lives in a camp, or is this someone who goes to a shelter, right? Is this somebody who's, been couch surfing on and off for a few years and then comes into shelter every once in a while? What does it look like? What are their supports and what's their routine? Because as we talked about, when people move in housing, they don't have anything to do. And that routine, replacing that routine, maybe somebody was a leader in an encampment, Well, who are they going to boss around when they move in housing if they're all by themselves in their apartment, right? So what about those roles and routines? Or if somebody was in our shelter and they were junior staff and they were helping us out and they move into housing, who are they helping out? Well, maybe they have someone to help in their family, maybe they don't. But maybe they can volunteer or get some form of work, right? So we want to think about this really from a prevention perspective and reinforcements. If somebody never signed a lease before, which a lot of families that you're working with, about 20% of homeless families are under 25. So it might be the very first time they signed a lease. Some of you may be working with chronically homeless people who've never had a lease, who may have been homeless for years and may be long in the tooth in their 50s, maybe in their 60s and 70s. So we don't want to make assumptions about these things. We definitely want to, confirm with the person. And then we want to use that information to create a plan, a housing stability plan or a service plan, or a housing plan. Housing plan is nice and simple. And we're going to pick, we're just introducing this concept today. As Andrea mentioned, there's a service plan or housing stability plan form that's linked in this slide a few slides ago. But we're using the service plan as a way for people to be successful. We're setting goals with them in partnership with the worker. So I want to maintain my housing so I can have some fun. I want to have a date. I want to have somebody sleep over in my bed.
Yep.
Right. So we want to know that. We want to um the goals to be mutually set, not us saying you want to maintain your housing, but find that real thing they can feel. And we want to limit the goals in the stability plan, no more than 3. So usually we could do a quick poll, but you can put it in the chat. We ask people how many of you are working on personal goals. And in a group like this, probably 90+% are working on personal goals. And then we ask if how many people are working on more than 3 personal goals. And then the number goes that much down. Might be in this group, it's 77 people, maybe 3 or 4 of you are working on more than 3 goals. There's a few overachievers, but most people can't work on more than 3 goals. So we want the housing stability plan to be focused. We want something around housing, and we want something usually around income and or supports. And we want the service plan, not to be a document that goes in the folder that means nothing, but to be something we use regularly in our meetings with people. When you look at the sample that we have, there's a place for the tenant to sign, there's a place for the worker to sign. We want to pull that out and use that when we're meeting with people to talk about the goals and to talk about resources. What supports do they need? You guys have talked a lot about resources. And then we want to help them set goals they can achieve, right? So maybe somebody wants to become a medical doctor. We had a client like this who was severely mentally ill and didn't have a GED, but she wanted to be a medical doctor. Well, we had to break that goal down into manageable pieces, right? Because, it's a long way to medical school. And we started with getting her GED, right? So she could have some success. So we want to build the service plans with goals in them that people can feel successful from achieving. And if they don't achieve them, then they're a learning experience. We learned something. Okay, that program didn't work for you. But we're using this so that we build confidence for other successes. It's really, people are demoralized when they're homeless. People are been told they're less than, they've been told they're nothing, they've been told they don't matter, they've been disenfranchised, they've been ignored. So building people's confidence is really important for their ongoing success in life. So we are looking at long term where people want to go. What is that long term goal? So that we have that in the maybe somebody of the family, they want to be a homeowner and have a single family home in the suburbs. Well, we can work with that. That's motivation, something that people are motivated for. But we are also in the stability plan helping people learn new skills, as Andrea mentioned, and we'll talk about skills next time too, to manage resources and making sure that people can really start to manage their own resources, manage their lease, talk to their landlord, and that we teach people rather than do for them. And that, takes more time. But ultimately, especially in rapid rehousing, we're not going to be there. So we need to spend a little more time to teach people how to do things rather than do it for them. I know I can go online and get those food stamp benefits activated in 3 clicks. It's going to take me a half an hour if I sit there with the person, but ultimately it'll be better for that person so that they know how they can do it the next time. And then we've talked about also helping people really have some kind of structure in their lives, purpose, some sense of activity. You know, if people have kids, very often their lives are structured around their kids. They got to get them to school. That provides a structure for the day. Summer is a different story, which we're coming on. Maybe we hopefully can set them up with some camp or something like that, so kids have something to do. But for single adults, it's often hard to figure out, what am I going to do all day now that I don't have all the things I had to do while I was homeless, of getting to the shelter, getting a meal, you know, doing this, doing that. So helping people in the plan, maybe it's to make a friend, maybe it's to take a walk around the neighborhood for 5 minutes every morning, but helping people also have some sense of role, or maybe they want to volunteer, like that example I just used. And this is really the point we'll be ending on when we're talking about goals. And we've been talking about goals a lot. Andrea's mentioned it, I've mentioned it, that we really want these goals to be the participants' goals, the tenants' goals, not our goal, right? Like, as Andrew said, housing stabilization. It's not a very sexy, exciting goal. My goal is housing stabilization, but my goal is house in the suburbs with a yard so I don't look poor, right? That's something that people can feel, right? And we really, when people give us a goal and we're working on setting a goal with them, yeah, okay, this is the person's 900 service plan, and we say, so what are your goals? Oh, I want to I want housing stabilization. That's my goal. That's not how people talk, right? Or if they do, then we got to dig deeper and find out, what does that mean, right? And so there's something called the so that principle. So I want to keep my housing wide so that what happens? So I can get a date, so I can get a better job, so I can get my kids back, so I can not be ashamed and I can reconnect with my family, right? The reason behind the goal is what's really important, right? Is, what does it mean to people? And having that conversation, not in a sarcastic way. Oh, you want to keep your housing so that what, Andrea? Come on, like, things are going to get better for you. Obviously, we're not talking to them like that. We're wanting to say, so what does this house mean to you? What is important to you? What is going to make you feel good about your housing? What is going to make you want your housing? So that what? So we're really understanding what is motivating the person, and what they could feel, right? And what's going to be meaningful to them. So for that woman who wanted to live in Malibu, I think I talked about her before, she wanted to live in a wealthy area and not feel poor. She still lives in public housing, but she lives in Malibu, right? So that's all that you have to say. Your location is Malibu. Barbara Streisand lives there. That shows my age. All right. So other famous people live there who are younger too, and I'll find out by next time. So we only have 2 minutes left, so we're not going to put you into breakout groups. But you could do this back, back at your when you're back with your team and your site, to really have a conversation and kind of play out this so that conversation. So one person would set a goal, say, oh, I want to eat healthy, right? Not too personal. Don't say I want to, like, get divorced. Don't use that for the example. I want to eat healthy. And then the other person is the worker and tries to elicit, why do you want to eat healthy? Do you want to eat healthy so you live long? Do you want to eat healthy so you look good in your clothes, right? Those are two really different motivations. Both are legitimate, but it's really, again, about understanding what's important to people. And if we're going to be doing this work and helping people, we want to have a relationship with them, and we want to know what's important to them. We want to know what's meaningful. So this breakout goals, you could do it for 10, 15 minutes and try to have that conversation to dig deeper. Or you're all going to go back to work in 1 minute when I end this session. You could do it with one of your clients when they say to you, or your participants, I have this goal, and you could explore what is it that they want to get from that goal. So, we're going to close this session up right now real quickly, where we said we overviewed the practice. We're trying to help people to find their space and get the resources and skills they need to manage it. Helping people, connecting to people, which it's clear you all are doing such wonderful work in engagement and goal setting, is really a collaborative process. And we're going to talk about tenancy skills and working with partners and landlords and property managers next time. We'll pick up on the housing plan and really go into the form and talk about a little bit more on goals. We'll talk about resources, community resources. We'll talk about landlords and property managers, and we'll talk about eviction prevention strategies. And it is the top of the hour. So we're going to say thank you and see you next week, same time, same channel. If you want to turn on your cameras just to wave to us so we could see your lovely faces. And if anybody has any last minute things to say, we'll be here for a few minutes. But we really enjoyed meeting you today and we look forward to next week. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A real
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank